Hey everyone, it's Fox with Foxio Games, and let's talk about the ideal Dark Souls 2 PvP build. When I say ideal, what I mean is that this is pretty much the best build for having the most effectiveness during PvP, player versus player combat. It's also very effective for PvE, player versus environment, or player versus the game itself, the enemies and the AI in the game. So, during the course of Demon Souls and Dark Souls, you'll notice that most players concern themselves a lot, if they went online and did a lot of PvP, they concern themselves a lot with exactly how to spend their stat points. Because soul level was basically the only factor that mattered when it came to matchmaking in PvP, people tried to create this sort of metagame concept of having a set soul level where most people will be around that level so that they can all encounter each other during PvP combat. Now, if you were, for example, to level your character really high, say you were level 500 in either game, you would experience substantially less multiplayer interaction, particularly PvP, of course depending on how you either invaded or tried to get summoned. Now, there were, of course, ways where you could, invade someone who's really high level or invade someone who's lower level, but for the most part, the easiest way to stay within range of other players, the maximum number of players, was simply to stay at what is considered the metagame soul level. And during the course of Dark Souls, that was pretty much somewhere around 120, 125. So I think most players who wanted to participate in a lot of PvP, they pretty much limited their characters to the somewhere between 120 to 130 range. Therefore, they could get noticed by other players more easily, their summon signs would be seen, they could be summoned more easily, they could join fight clubs without, having any problems there, getting summoned. So that was sort of a metagame, soul level limitation that players imposed on themselves, not to make themselves weaker, not to limit their character's power, but simply in order to see more people in the game, to encounter more people in the game. Now, with Dark Souls 2, that's not the case. You see, your soul level actually doesn't matter. Soul memory is the only matchmaking factor of any significant importance, as well as new game. If you're a new game, you're separated from New Game Plus and beyond. But aside from that, soul memory is how you get matched up with other players. So essentially, what you've got is a situation in which, depending on how you've used your souls that you've collected, you may have players of vastly different levels interacting with each other, seeing each other's summon signs, summoning each other, and encountering each other in PvP. So it's actually possible for a soul level 120 in Dark Souls 2 to regularly encounter a soul level 500, 600 because of the soul memory mechanic. And while I'm being a bit facetious when I do this, I do want to point out one of the flaws of the soul memory system in the process by simply showing you guys, or telling you about what is the ideal PvP build. It's really simple. 99 of all stats. The thing that makes this so sad is that one of the most fun parts and challenging parts about Demon Souls and Dark Souls was fine-tuning your particular build, the concept of a build. In actuality, Dark Souls 2 doesn't have builds based on stats or levels. The only thing that really separates a build is the equipment that you use. Because you can have everything on the same character. You can have faith, and you can have tons of intelligence, you can have tons of strength. I mean, if you want to, you can use all of the magic in the game, the pyro, the heaviest weapons, wear the heaviest armor, still fast roll, equip tons of spells, I mean, have tons of health, have tons of stamina, have tons of dexterity. There really are no limitations. And while there are some players who are trying to limit themselves to soul level 150, that is an optional limit that has no hard-coded basis in the actual game code itself. You see, the soul level 120 or 120-ish metagame range of Dark Souls and somewhat Demon Souls, that was hard-coded into the game. If you decided you didn't want to follow that, everyone's like, fine, do your own thing, but you aren't going to get a lot of PvP out of it. And you wouldn't. If you wanted to go participate in fight clubs, if you wanted to participate in events, if you wanted to see a lot of people's summon signs, you wouldn't. If you were level 700, you just wouldn't. And so there was a pressing need not to do that if you wanted to encounter a lot of multiplayer. Whereas in Dark Souls 2, you can be level 838 or whatever the maximum is and still get plenty of PvP. And this is not a limitation that players have to abide by for any reason whatsoever other than just their own sense of, well, this is better. Is it better to limit yourself to 150? I don't know. I don't know if it's really better. Do some people consider it better? Of course. Would some people not consider it better? Of course. But for me, I don't see the point in arbitrarily limiting myself when I know that the vast majority of players I encounter are probably not going to arbitrarily limit themselves. So I don't want to give myself an unnecessary handicap. And while some players are just so good at the game, they can continue to excel with their own self-imposed handicaps, well, that's just not my goal. I don't see myself as that skilled of a player. And if you are, that's good. That's good. I'm glad. And yeah, do what makes you happy in the game, obviously. But for some other players, they're going to be level 800, and you're going to encounter them with your soul level 150. And that's just how it's going to go. And the game is going to be like that until or unless it gets changed. And let me say this, and I want to be very, very clear. I have no inside knowledge of what's going to go on with the future of Dark Souls 2, but I am very, very confident that they will never change the soul memory system of Dark Souls 2. There are petitions to go back to a soul level matching system. Let me just say this. If they were to change the entire structure of how matchmaking occurs in this game, it would be one of the first examples of that ever happening in the history of video games. It's just not going to happen. It's not something they're going to change. FromSoft has shown that they're willing to tweak and modify items and weapons and armors and damage amounts and defense amounts and poise amounts, but they're not willing or they're not able to go that far to change some of the core mechanics of the game. It's just not going to happen. I mean, in theory, yes, it's possible. It is plausible. It is within the realm of possibility that they could come out with this massive patch that does away with soul memory. Is it likely? No. Is it even remotely possible? I don't think so. I think it's a pipe dream. I think it's a pie in the sky dream. I don't think it's ever going to happen. You know, one of the few examples I can think of where a developer actually listened and humbled themselves to the point of the kind of extreme that this would require would be Squaresoft when they released Final Fantasy XIV. They were forced to realize that they had totally botched the game, and they basically scrapped the entire game, started over, and re-released Final Fantasy XIV Rebirth, or whatever they called it, which was basically remade. That's essentially what they'd have to do with Dark Souls 2. I don't think they're going to do that. This is primarily a single-player experience. I mean, yeah, there's a ton of multiplayer, but this isn't an MMO, and they don't need to continue to get your subscription fees. You know, once you paid for the game, that's most of the money they're going to make off it, and then, of course, they figure most of you are going to buy the DLC whether you really like the core game or not. You know, they've got a lot of us hooked on the Souls series, so we just continue to buy it, even if we're a bit disappointed. But soul memory is not going to change. That's my opinion, and I feel pretty confident in saying that. So, with the ideal PvP build being the same, and everyone simply being able to push their stats ever upward with no repercussions and no negative consequences, only positive consequences, why wouldn't they? You're going to encounter more and more high-level players, and it's not going to stop, guys. It's not going to stop. And some of these soul level 150 people who are following this metagame concept that a few streamers or uploaders have tried to create, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, there's not. I appreciate what they're trying to do. I guarantee you a lot of the people that have been following this are going to go, you know what, screw it, I'm tired of getting my butt kicked by level 750s and 800s, I'm leveling up. And they're going to start leveling up again. You know, they're going to be sick of seeing people that have the highest level faith spells and sorceries and hexes and pyros all on the same character, while simultaneously wearing Havel's armor, while simultaneously carrying big heavy weapons with Sunlight Blade and all that crap, and then still fast rolling, having more iframes than the Dark Woodgrain Ring gave you in Dark Souls. Think about it. You can now fast roll with more iframes than the Dark Woodgrain Ring, and you don't need a ring to do it, and you can wear the heaviest armor and carry the heaviest equipment. Do you see this as a problem? Because I do. I see this as a balance issue. It is no longer interesting to try to create a new build. I have one PvP character, and all of Dark Souls 2. There's no reason to make another one. If you want to switch up your character, you just switch gear. That's it. You can have everything on the same character. Why would I go all the way back through the game, re-level, redo it all, recollect all the bonfires, lighten them all, then recollect all the gear, re-farm, which is unbelievably annoying in this game, trying to farm stuff. Why go through all that hassle again when you just don't need to? The only reason to have multiple characters is simply to have ready-to-go gear sets that you don't have to swap out. But considering that it takes about 60 seconds to swap out your gear for another set, I'm just not going to put in another 30, 40, 50 hours of playtime and farming to create another character when you can have it all on one character. And that, guys, is the ideal PvP build. 99 of all stats. I'm Fox with Foxio Games. Leave your comments below, and I will see you next time.